Welcome to Bigfoot Collectors Club, The Other Side.
Hello, Los Angeles, and our friends around the world. Welcome to a BCC Movie Club. Before we get started, I'd like to give you the weather. It's 67 degrees Fahrenheit in Los Angeles today. There's a slight breeze to the south, 1 to 3 miles per hour. It's 8% humidity, and we might get some much-needed rain this weekend. I'm looking forward to that. All right, everybody, let's have a great movie club and a great day.
Oh, I felt like I was back in my car on the 101, Riley. That was perfect.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I missed those. I loved those.
I did too. What a wonderful treat where you could just be in your hometown and just getting weather updates from David Lynch in the morning. God, this is the magic of Hollywood, okay?
I know. I love that we shared the planet with that. It was a lovely time.
It was
Just
a lovely time.
Nod to the man.
Speaking of a lovely time, hello, everybody. Welcome back to BCC The Other Side for a very special movie club episode. I'm your host, Michael McMillian. Oh, with me always is your ultra-terrestrial producer,
Riley Bray.
Don't forget to send in some suggestions for Riley's title. Write them down in the comments section of this episode on the Patreon website, and we'll include them in future episodes. We are talking about Lost Highway today.
Yes.
Now, out of all the David Lynch movies, I mean, I guess I know the answer to this one, but why did we pick this, Riley? Why do you think we picked this movie to talk about, and specifically?
Honestly, I don't know. I hadn't revisited this one in a while. This is one of those ones that I'd seen. I saw this right after I saw Inland Empire in theaters, and was
weird.
baffled by it, and then I was like, I need more, and then I hunted down this one on DVD. So I was a teenager when I saw this originally, and this is like back in the era too of like late night Showtime, you know. So I was like, because it's like, you know, it's a little sexy, this one, a little scandalous.
It's a lot sexier, although, like, let me say this: there's a lot more nudity and a lot of sex in it that I forgot about.
Yeah,
but it's not necessarily sexy. Like, some of the sex is kind of sad sex or terrifying sex. It's disturbing sex or sad sex. I think there's like maybe one kind of hot sex scene that's towards the end in front of the headlights of the car. That was kind of hot. Right. That's pretty hot.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like sex in David Lynch's movies, although Mulholland Drive has got a pretty hot sex scene in it.
That's true.
That was a whole thing. I remember when Mulholland Drive came out, everyone was like, "There's a lesbian sex scene in it, and it's so hot."
Scintillating.
That was all anybody was talking about. I was like, the rest of this movie is pretty rad too.
Yeah.
Why
would you say this is the one we picked? Why did we pick this? I don't even remember.
Well, I just wanted to finish my thought. I was like sex in David Lynch movies, it's more to be like looked at and thought about than it is to be like, ooh, you know.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
There's some real sad married sex at the beginning of this movie that's just depressing, I feel like. I chose Lost Highway for us because when I saw this movie for the first time, it was probably a year. I think we talked about this on the Eric Edelstein tribute episode about David Lynch. I was about a year into the podcast, or about a year into the show, and I think I had bought this at Amoeba on Criterion and just had it, and I was like, let me put in Lost Highway. I have this. I haven't watched it yet. And I hadn't watched Twin Peaks yet from beginning to end. I had not seen The Return yet. I had not seen most of his movies. I had seen Mulholland Drive. Yeah. And I just felt like, first of all, the first 30 minutes of the movie is essentially a haunted house film. Sure. It's basically, you know what I mean? It's the energy of like, there's something in the house that we don't know why it's here, and it's scaring the shit out of us. Mm-hmm. And then I felt like the moment, and we're going to get into it, the moment where like he meets the man with the camera at the party really jumped out at me as a real true moment of high strangeness. And I think there are a lot of comparisons in this movie with that character specifically and the Indrid Cold Mothman and Mothman prophecies. There's some like weird parallels to the movie Mothman prophecies in this movie, I feel like, that we'll get into. I felt like this was a filmmaker that understood high strangeness and what going through a highly strange moment or an encounter must really feel like in a way, you know, sort of stripped of the sci-fi gloss and made very personal and strange. All the I mean, there's stuff in this movie that even hints at UFO activity as well. If you look at it through that lens, so like the strange lights and being abducted and finding yourself in a new place. So I just thought there was a lot. I thought, holy shit, this guy gets it, and now I gotta watch everything that he's ever done. And then obviously going back into Twin Peaks, and a lot of this comes from Mark Frost as well. But Twin Peaks has got there's literally mentions of Project Blue Book in Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, they are into this stuff. Like this is a guy who does things, you know, makes films about high strangeness. So this was my way in, I guess.
That's interesting. You came in through the scary back door. It was like, I think this is one of his more disturbing films.
It's very disturbing.
It's the darkest tone. I think a lot of Mulholland Drive has some really dark notes, but this is, and I guess Inland Empire is dark, and it's just that it's so weird and like. Well,
Inland Empire is also dark because like you literally can't see half the movie. It's just dark, and it's made to look like shit, which is a choice that like I don't. I mean, I support. I don't fully understand. I would rather be able to like look at the movie. You know, we can talk about that at another time. Also, I do love in Inland Empire that one of the ways is you can cross through to parallel dimensions by burning holes in fabric with cigarettes. And then you create portals to other dimensions. That's great. So that, again, high strangeness, you know, he makes movies about portals.
Yeah.
All right. Before we dive in, let's swing over to the Commenters Club for some thoughts from our Club Scouts about David Lynch. Why don't you read this one from our friend Beth Borland?
Okay, I will. Well, Beth says, such a great episode and tribute, you guys. Loved hearing some of Eric's stories and experiences. And if you guys decided to do a whole Lynch movie club series, I would 100% be here for it.
Don't
that might happen.
Tempt me with a year-long project that I will fully sign up for.
Yeah.
We'll think about it.
I'm happy to rewatch everything. I've seen them all, and I'll watch them all again.
I think we can at least do like a David Lynch's High Strangeness tour where we can kind of cherry pick a couple films and maybe a couple episodes of Twin Peaks to discuss and see how it pertains to, you know, to the subject. Susan B, welcome back. Susan B said, I loved Twin Peaks when it first came out. Obsessed with it, really. It took me to another place, although I could never say where that was. I didn't feel the same about his films, but this BCC episode has me considering another go at some of them. The weird thing is that I'm a little hesitant because I know they will take me to another place, mess with my head, which is what I loved about Twin Peaks. His death touches me in a cosmic way, and I don't understand why. Thanks for doing this tribute. I mean, well said, and all valid points.
Totally. I think it's
weird because even when we started Lost Highway and I knew that it was a dark movie, I felt so cozy being back into the realm of David. I was like, yay, I'm going to hang out with David Lynch for a couple hours. What's Julie Kumasaka say?
There you boys go again, delivering something I didn't know that I needed at just the right time. What a cool episode. I have not, so far, been a fan of David Lynch's work, but after listening to this episode, I am now a fan of the man. Love it. Also, I finally feel like I understand why his art is so revered. Eric's stories of Lynch's creative process were especially enlightening. Life doesn't provide, wait, it's in quotes. Life doesn't provide answers. Why should art have to? Is such a beautiful perspective that is bringing me much joy during a challenging time. I'm going to give Twin Peaks another shot. Ooh, please do, Julie.
Please do. And I will say this to all of our listeners. If you're on the fence about David Lynch, then do Twin Peaks. Just give honestly, Twin
really
Peaks
inviting.
season 1 and halfway through season 2, you're getting it. You're getting it. But I would say do that because it's 1990s ABC television. It cannot get too dark. It does. I mean, the subject is, but there's also an element of folksiness and wholesomeness to it and quirkiness to it that really spoke to and attracted mainstream audiences. And also you'll watch it and you'll go, oh, wow, without this, television would not exist in the way that it does today. Like Twin Peaks inspired premium cable dramas. It was like premium cable before premium cable was a thing.
Mm-hmm. And it broke so many rules, and it opened the whole form up to become so much more free and artistic, and let shows become this sort of weird, expanding, expansive universe rather than sort of like a tightly controlled, put a bow on it at the end of 30 minutes.
Week to week narrative or
exactly.
episode to episode period, procedural. The other movie I would say is if you just want to say you watched a David Lynch movie, watch The Straight Story. It's rated G. It's on Disney Plus. It's a beautiful film. Truly. I feel like you get basically like The Straight Story is David Lynch's appreciation for Americana and small town goodness and good people without the dark mirror reflecting back. However, underneath it, there is this, you are dealing with a very old man who knows it is like, I think you described rightly, like death is coming.
Yeah, it's a profound existential thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get glimpses of like, this is a man where dark things have happened to him and his family in the past, but we're in a moment of personal triumph and we're getting a look at society, I think, at its best in that movie.
Absolutely. And I mean, he's a Midwesterner too. Like that's where he comes from. That's his core. And like, you can see the love and care and attention he puts towards like representing that whole swath of the, what a lot of us liberal city elites call the flyover states, is like, he delves
where
in
I
such
grew
a
up.
beautiful way. Yeah, exactly. See, he's a Midwesterner. But yeah, I mean, I think for a while, some people considered that like minor Lynch or whatever, but it is definitely not. I think it is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful film, and really couldn't recommend it enough.
Yeah, and I agree. It's you know what? I had not watched it until recently. I had not seen that one. That was one that I kept going, oh yeah, The Straight Story. I gotta watch
that. Was the last one I saw too, because I kind of was like, I just glossed over it, and then then it hit me. I was like, wow, this is just it's awesome. It's
beautiful.
Performances he coaxes out of the actors in that are just phenomenal. Yeah.
It's great. So those are, I would say, do Twin Peaks, watch the Twin Peaks pilot, and then watch The Straight Story. And you can say you've watched some David Lynch, and I think you'll get a good sense of who he is as a person and a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. All right, let's get into Lost Highway, shall we? Directed by David Lynch, written by David Lynch and Barry Gifford. Do you know who Barry Gifford is, Riley?
I don't. Do you know?
Barry Gifford is a novelist who wrote the book that Wild at Heart was based on. Wild at Heart, we criminally underrepresented in our conversation with Eric Edelstein. Wild at Heart is one of my favorite David Lynch
just glossed
movies.
Over that. Yeah.
Wild at Heart is based on the sailor and, oh gosh, what's her name? What's Laura Dern's character's name? But there's a series of books that Barry Gifford wrote that Wild at Heart is based on. David Lynch adapted that on his own, but during the making of Wild at Heart, the two men, Barry Gifford and David Lynch, found a mutual appreciation for each other. And they decided to collaborate for a movie together. So he co-wrote Lost Highway with Barry Gifford, kind of combining Gifford's sort of neo-noir sensibilities and, people on the run, they're the Bonnie and Clyde stuff that's in Wild at Heart, with David Lynch's, sensibilities of like I think this movie is about particularly media invading the home. This movie was made in the late 90s. This is like after all the O.J. Simpson murders and the just like the tabloid culture of the late 90s. So I think this movie's a lot about that. It was produced by Mary Sweeney, Tom Sternberg, Deepak Nair. It stars Bill Pullman, Patricia Arquette, Balthazar Getty, Robert Blake, Natasha Gregson, Natasha Gregson, Gary Busey, Robert Loggia, and I guess Natasha Gregson Wagner is her name.
There we go. Yeah, I was like, there's one extra name in there.
There's one guy in here who I don't know who.
Who's Wagner?
Peter Deming did the cinematography. It was edited by Mary Sweeney, and the music is, of course, by Angelo Badalamenti, who composed Twin Peaks.
Yeah, longtime collaborator.
Yeah, this came out January 15th, 1997, so we're just around the anniversary date in France, and February 21st, in 1997 in the U.S. It's a 2-hour and 15-minute movie, so make a little room for it. And box office, not that great, 3.8 million. This movie did not make money, and people did not like it.
I saw a poster that they released at the time that was 2 thumbs down from Siskel and Ebert, and it said 2 more reasons to see Lost Highway. And I was like, fuck yeah.
Again, I think it's a movie where I don't know why people didn't like it. I think some of these films are ahead, it's ahead of its time. It is avant-garde. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's weird. It is a weird movie. It's not a traditional narrative. We'll get into it. But here is the synopsis.
Itself. Yeah.
No, doesn't answer itself. And sometimes I think like, no, what you think is happening, it's literally happening. It's not a metaphor. This thing is just actually happening. That's what is happening. Yeah. Here's the synopsis. Fred Madison, played by Bill Pullman, a saxophonist, quite a saxophonist, I might say.
Tenor.
is accused under mysterious circumstances of murdering his wife, Renee, played by Patricia Arquette. On death row, he inexplicably morphs into a young man named Pete Dayton, who's played by Balthazar Getty, leading a completely different life. When Pete is released, his and Fred's paths begin to cross in a surreal, suspenseful web of intrigue orchestrated by a shady gangster boss named Dick Laurent, a.k.a. Mr. Eddie.
Mr. Eddie.
So why don't we play the trailer? And then when we come back, we're going straight to spoiler country, and we're talking all about Lost Highway.
All right, here we go.
Okay, kids, spoiler country. Now, I will say, I watched this on Criterion. I own this movie, so I'm not sure where to find it right now on streaming. Where did you watch it?
I watched it on Criterion. I'm switching my streaming services over. I'm not to be like pretentious, but I just realized like there's so many amazing films that I haven't seen, and so many of them are on the Criterion Channel, and I am tired of sifting through schlock. So I was like, I'm changing it up.
I got a year subscription to Criterion as a Christmas gift to my brother-in-law and my sister because it's great. It's great. So you can find this movie.
It's around. I think it's on Max.
It's around.
I think it's pretty sure.
I think it is on Max too. On Max too. You can find it. I will say for our squeamish viewers, listeners, there is some gore in this movie. There's some great kind of like horror movie moments of gore. There's one in particular I'm thinking at involving a glass coffee table at the end of the movie. So just be prepared. It's not gratuitous in the sense that a lot of these things can be. And there's some sort of like scary sex stuff if that's not your bag. But otherwise, dive on in. Yeah. So here we go. We're entering spoiler country. Lost Highway. I'll kick it off with this, Riley.
All right.
I love an opening of a movie that makes it feel like you're watching an action film with a soundtrack from David Bowie. The opening credits speeding down the freeway to like this David Bowie music with like the titles rushing at your face is just
Totally.
fucking. I'm like, oh, this looks like a Fast and Furious movie, and that is not what we're about to get into.
Not at all. Yeah, that track. Bowie did that with Brian Eno too. It's a great. I forget what the song is called. But it's a banger of a track.
It
and it's
is
like
so good.
Great sort of 90s era Bowie with that sort of like weird ballad voice, like we're going on a spooky ride kind of vibe.
There's only one way out, and it's through the eye of a needle. It's like very strange. I don't know.
Yeah.
David Bowie writes better
buckle up,
lyrics,
baby.
Yeah. I also love that David Bowie and David Lynch cross paths. I love that he's in Fire Walk with Me. And he was supposed to be in Twin Peaks: The Return, and it just didn't happen. And then I think Bowie passed away. But it's like, God, yes, those two collaborated. Like, that's fucking awesome. Trent Reznor's, like he's
all over the score. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Trent Reznor. Did we talk about that in Eric's episode? Did you mention?
We did, yeah. I mentioned it, that the story that Trent Reznor tells of David Lynch coming to his studio, and he was expecting him to like bring picture, and he was going to score a picture, and David Lynch was just told him to imagine, like, I don't remember it exactly, but something along the lines of imagine snakes are just flying at you. Okay, now give me that. And Trent Reznor's like, oh boy. But
honestly,
he did it.
Great note. I would love that note. Yeah, nailed it.
Yeah. As long as we're on the music too, this movie introduced me to a ton of music. This movie introduced me to Trent Reznor, which led me to Nine Inch Nails. This movie introduced me to Rammstein at the time. This movie did introduce me to Marilyn Manson, who I will say, growing up, I was quite obsessed with, and finding out, what we found out now is a deeply shocking and disappointing.
Makes a cameo in the movie too, right?
He does.
The snuff film. I was like, that's.
And his bandmate Twiggy Ramirez, which weirdly is, I don't know. We don't need to get into the whole Manson thing, but but the music of the 90s and this like heavy industrial stuff and like this kind of goth stuff this is where I found all that from when I was a young teen kicking around LA, and stuck with me.
I forgot that this movie also has one of my favorite music cue moments in any of David Lynch's movie is when the cover of This Magic Moment, when Balthazar Getty sees Patricia Arquette for the first time getting out of the car, and it slows down, and it's just this like really beautiful. It's also like, I feel like David Lynch taking a moment to be like, look at how beautiful Patricia Arquette is. We all need to stop watching the movie and look at her. Yeah. Who does that cover of This Magic Moment?
Oh, I don't know. Look it up. While you look it up, I'll talk about it. I saw a tweet that made me actually lol, where it was like, they were talking about how they were like, David Lynch was a legendary horn dog, but he never got.
Oh, it's Lou Reed. It's Lou Reed. I knew I recognized that voice. Of course. Yeah.
It's like, but he never had any, he never got in trouble, never had any accusations, never did anything bad, because he knew that a proper man is a horn dog. He sits in his chair and his eyes pop out and he says awooga, awooga, and he hits himself over the head with a hammer, and that is respectful. And that just made me laugh.
I mean, he just put his like male gaze on camera on full display. Yeah,
but there's something weirdly sweet about it, and sort of
is
respectful
and
in a way. Where
his actresses love him. You know what I mean? I think he was always respectful. But that Lou Reed moment where she's getting out of the car halfway through the film, it's just like, it's such a great, just, you could play that little clip on its own independently of the movie and just like love just watching that moment. And it's just a little storytelling moment where you're like, and you get, it did remind, I mean, like, that's another thing where like, as weird and as avant-garde as his films can be, there are always moments to connect emotionally with what's on screen. And I felt like that's a perfect moment where you're like, oh yeah, don't you remember being young and being just like overwhelmingly attracted to somebody you've just seen and have a massive crush on, and the excitement of eye contact from across the room and wondering if they're thinking of what you're thinking, and if that stuff, like he always finds moments like that that's like everyone has had and puts it somewhere in his work.
And it's earnest, and he's not shying away from it either. It's just very human and just you relate to it, you feel it. It puts you in that place.
Patricia Arquette, Bill Pullman, but also I just want to say peak good looking in these two actors' careers.
Yes,
oh my God, how beautiful are both of them in this movie?
Absolutely.
Good God.
Man, the scene where Bill Pullman is at the club shredding saxophone, that's also like so David Lynch that like the music that is being played is the most insane jazz you've ever heard in your life.
Yes. David Lynch likes to put music in his films that sound like animals under attack. Like it's just wild. It's the wildest sax show you've ever seen. And the fact that he's like upset that his girlfriend is leaving his show. It's like, dude, are you hearing what you're playing? A lot of people should be walking out right now.
Yeah. And the idea that they live in this beautiful house in the Hollywood Hills because he plays that kind of music. She has a job ? She had a job at one point ? I know, it's so great. And again, it's like a weird, there is a sense of early in the movie, it's like, I do love this sort of like, what are the people in the Hollywood Hills doing? What happens in those houses high up on those hills? Yeah.
And it is that spooky, I feel like he captures like the spookiness of the Hollywood Hills and the canyons really well in this movie.
Very much so, yeah. For me, like this movie kind of breaks into 3 acts, and this first act is like it's pretty much a noir film. Like it's pretty much straight up like and I think those detective characters are kind of the only characters in the film really that ground us in full reality. I think those guys are kind of existing outside of whatever this quantum entanglement thing is.
Right.
And they almost represent us as the viewer, and they're the ones that are looking in, and they're not really touched by everything else that's going on. And this, this first act where it's, Pete murders his wife basically is a noir crime film, and it's like,
it is, but I also think it's that, but it's also a haunted house movie.
Yeah, I see
it's
that
the
too.
first act of a horror movie where a couple who are seemingly pretty unhappy in their marriage and in their lives and growing apart are suddenly invaded by a spirit in the house that this could be the beats of that opening act could be something out of a James Wan or Blumhouse horror movie where there's a ghost in the house, except instead of like, oh, well, the cabinet doors are suddenly open, it's I don't know what's happening with my dogs right now. Give me one second, everybody.
So it's these videotapes, right? So they're getting these videotapes dropped off on their doorstep, and first it's just the front of the house in this black and white grainy thing, very ominous, and then the next videotape that shows up
is being invaded, but it's just like somebody walked by or dropped off a package and they're freaking out.
I was just explaining the videotape is like the cabinet doors being opened, like and that first one is just the exterior, and then the next one it's in the house and it's watching. It's in the house,
and what's great about in the second tape, where, and I'm sure everybody noticed this, but I don't think I really noticed it the first time that I watched it, was the video camera angle is too high for somebody walking through the house. It's almost at ceiling level. And it seems to imply that it comes down, and even the detectives who come by to see if their house is being broken into, it does seem, it seems like this thing lowers through, and we know it's the Robert Blake figure, the man with the camera, comes down, somehow phases through the skylight and is floating through the house. And the angle of them, the voyeuristic angle of them sleeping in their bed is from the ceiling. It's not somebody walking along the bed. It's a high angle. So you have this feeling that it is a ghost in the house. It's a ghost or some sort of extra dimensional being in their home taking video at an angle that a human couldn't pull off without a rig of some kind. So it's a haunted house. He even sees the face of Robert Blake projected on her after his nightmare, after waking up from his nightmare.
Scary moment. That's
super
a great,
creepy moment.
Great
and
effect.
There's also the mysterious intercom call at the beginning that says Dick Laurent is dead, and then looking out the window and not seeing anybody. And apparently that happened to David Lynch in real life. He says that he woke up one morning and his intercom buzzed and somebody said Dick Laurent is dead, and when he went to look out in his front door, there was nobody there. And that was something that stuck in his head, and that became the starting point for this movie.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. So I think yes, it's noir, but it's also horror movie.
Very
and
much,
then
yeah.
I think the middle section really becomes heavy on the noir, of the like gangster, young guy working for these gangsters as a mechanic, getting put under the arm of the heavy Robert Loggia, and then falling in love with.
Yeah, that is where it goes more noir. And I guess you're right. The beginning is a little bit more sort of modern, scary story, haunted house in the second. Because that's when you're getting also those shots of those super close-ups of her lips when they're on the phone.
Yes.
And those sort of like where it's lit, where there's just like a slit of light across like just the eyes or just the mouth. That's all like very clearly nods to these like old noir films. You're right. I think the second act is more the noir act.
I think so, because it's got the noir story beats of like, oh no, this young guy's fallen for the bad guy's girlfriend,
Right. Totally.
And what's going to happen? Is he going to find out? Are they going to get busted? And then I think the third act is kind of thriller. It's a thriller. Suddenly there's like, it's sort of like a Hitchcockian thriller. Then you really get into the like, wait a minute, is Patricia Arquette the same person in two parallel universes? Is she playing sisters? It's kind of like Kim Novak's role in Vertigo, where the dead woman shows up as another woman in the second act of the film, and Jimmy Stewart's haunted by her. Then you're finding out. Then it really becomes like a thriller. Like, we're breaking into somebody's house, we're stealing money. Oh no, we've murdered somebody. Now we're on the run. There's a couple different bad guys. There's a few twists where the bad guy who we've thought is the bad guy throughout the whole movie is now helping us kill the Robert Loggia, the Dick Laurent character. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's like the metaphysical thriller too. It's like that's where we're getting into this whole sort of like, quantum entanglement, and like where it's like, do both of these women exist on different planes? Are they the same person? Are they versions of themselves? Also, is this mysterious being, is this like an eternal sort of evil? Like, is this, he's clearly not bound by the same rules that everyone else is, because he can be in multiple places at the same time. That whole bit with him being like, call me when he's at the party.
Let's talk about that scene. So we're introduced so Robert Blake's character is this man who walks around with a video camera, although we don't see him with it right away. But he's wearing this like pale white makeup that I guess was Robert Blake's choice. He came in and wearing that makeup and said he wanted to wear that makeup. And David Lynch at first was like, I don't think so. And then he looked at him and he was like, oh, this is great. We got to do this. So he's almost like he's got like a Joker-esque appearance in this. And that to me is, this character is the Indrid Cold archetype from High Strangeness. He's the mysterious man you meet on the side of the highway in or around a UFO sighting, who talks to you as if he knows you, smiles at you, and imparts some sense of high strangeness in your life, and is sort of the threshold character the gatekeeper you will meet before going on some wild journey, which is exactly what happens to Bill Pullman's character, right?
And he seems to be able to sort of control people to a degree too. Like he kind of almost becomes like a puppet master in a way where, like the scene when he's with Mr. Eddie and Mr. Eddie's just like, well, I'm just glad to hear you're okay. It almost feels like he's talking through Mr. Eddie, like he's sort of puppet master controlling him. So he is on some level supernatural. He is not human.
No, he's not human. He's definitely not human.
He's something else. Yeah.
And the scene where he says, I'm at your house right now, call me, call your house. And he hands him Bill Pullman a cell phone and he answers on the other side. I told you I was here. That reminds me of the Indrid Cold stuff from Mothman Prophecies, where the chapstick scene, where the strange interdimensional phone call that you will get late one night while on a paranormal investigation. And he's obviously shown up in his house as a ghost. He can get in and out of his house without breaking in or opening any windows. He also seems to be connected to dreams, because in the scene later where they come home from the party and Bill Pullman walks down the long hallway and into the darkness, that shot is so spooky of just that negative space. And you think something's going to come out and nothing does. And he walks down the long, dark hallway. We see Patricia Arquette as Renee calling for him. And now that is the dream that he described that he had. I had a dream I was walking around the house and I heard you calling, but I couldn't find you. And then when I found you, you were in bed, but it wasn't you. Right.
Yeah.
And from the moment he walks down that hallway, we don't see the murder happen. We just basically jump cut to him being punched in the face by the detectives, and then a time cut jump to him being put into solitary confinement for execution.
Right.
So it kind of makes you wonder, are we in a dream now? Is the rest of this movie a dream? Did he really murder Renee? Is any of this real?
Right.
Has he sidestepped into another universe where he's no longer, or he's outside while the man with the camera is murdering Renee and looks like Bill Pullman? Like, we don't know. None of these things that we know, but reality completely turns on end. And then he morphs into Balthazar Getty.
Yeah.
And becomes a new character.
To me, I'm in my mind, I'm connecting that again. He's the one that switched them out or morphed them or whatever. Like he is somehow pulling the strings and in control of this whole situation. Like he is some sort of eternal force of, like, almost like, kind of like how they talk about in No Country for Old Men, how it's like he represents an eternal darkness and
yes.
My big takeaway from this,
like, Anton Chigurh is not an actual human being in No Country for Old Men. He is like the living embodiment of violence and evil that has existed for millennia and will continue to be passed on to generation to generation. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was thinking about that when I was watching it this time, and then I was watching this and I was thinking, like, this guy is kind of like, he's kind of like the keeper of the darkness. And like it's interesting because it's like when you give yourself to the darkness then takes control. And I think that you get it in two ways, where you have Bill Pullman's character is artistically giving himself to the darkness. And I think that that's, it's like he's dressed in black and that club is really dark and moody, and the music he's playing is dark and aggressive and kind of violent. And there's I think in a way, I mean, I have no idea what David Lynch is thinking. I don't think anyone will ever know. But this was my read on it, was that he's like artistically delving into the dark. And he goes so far into the dark, as represented in that scene you were talking about, where he literally is enveloped by the darkness, and then he's taken over by this sort of eternal being. And then Dick Laurent, Mr. Eddie, on the other hand, he is literally going into the darkness with violence and sex and this, you find out there's this snuff film at the end and these dark parties and drugs, and they never explicitly show drugs, but I would say it's implied. Where it's like, But yeah, so it's these two sides of sort of the darkness and delving in, and they both meet this figure that sort of is like the keeper of it, and they become sort of his playthings and his puppets, and that was like kind of the way. And there's like this quantum entanglement between like art and violence and all of these things, and you know, who the female figure in two forms. You also kind of wonder is how real is she? Is she a human embodiment of like the feminine side of this keeper of the darkness? Is she, or is she a victim of it? It's a little unclear. I'm not sure where I land on that, but she also has this sense that she's sort of in control and pulling the strings, especially when she's blonde version, femme fatale.
Well, sure. When she's Alice, is that her name? Alice?
Yeah, I think it's Alice. Yeah. It's Alice. Yeah. So that's kind of like that was where I went with it this time watching it, which I hadn't before.
I like that. I like that idea. And then I would say that maybe she or they, Renee and Alice, are the I mean, obviously they're the two sides of the same coin. There's definitely he's doing something with like the dark Betty Page and the blonde Marilyn Monroe there.
Yeah.
You know?
There's I mean, and even down to like 50s how her fingernail colors change and stuff.
Yes. And you might argue that maybe they are trying to escape the darkness into the light, but you know that Renee says, "Oh, I met Andy. He had a job for me," and he's like, "What job? What was it?"
Yeah.
And later, it seems to apply in the third act that like Renee was part of this weird snuff film, ring, and that she somehow got out of, whereas Alice, who might be her twin sister or might be her other identity, never did.
Right.
And again, here's a movie where David Lynch is dealing with dual identities. You have Bill Pullman and Balthazar Getty. They are two different people, but they're the same guy. You have Mr. Eddie and Dick Laurent, who goes by two different names but are the same guy. You have Alice and you have Renee, who are essentially the same person with two different identities. And this is a motif that goes through all of his movies. It's always about confronting the shadow self. And I think Robert Blake too, there's a lot of stuff in this movie where I think he's another demon or figure from the Black Lodge. Right. I think there's an argument you can make that this movie takes place in the same universe as Twin Peaks.
I think there's
a lot of Black Lodge. The red curtains in his house look like the red curtains from the Black Lodge. And that when he goes back there, his house is his bedroom is literally in the Black Lodge. That he's actually living, his own house is on one of these interdimensional portals that crosses over to the Black Lodge in the way that the Woods and Twin Peaks does as well. It's, I mean, if it's not literally the same universe, it's David Lynch dealing with the same stuff, the same idea of that there is something that overlaps with our reality and things come out of that reality and interact with us. And we go into that reality and interact with them, often through dreams, but also can happen in a real physical space.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's this sort of like unified field, and these parallel possibility realities overlapping over each other, where the lines start to blur, and both possibilities are existing simultaneously at the same time, and there is some sort of figure pulling the strings as this goes on.
And I think that the man with the camera is a like demonic embodiment of videotape, of media, of security cameras. Like the idea, part of me started to think like, oh, this is made around the time when like security cameras became like started to become a common thing in your house. And the idea of once you're putting cameras in your house pointed towards yourself, you've invited a new third party into your home that is sort of like a new voyeur. Even if no one's watching the tape, there is sort of, you're inviting the essence of voyeurism into your home. You're inviting invasion into your home because now your home is no longer private, right? You're invading your own house with cameras. And I think you can extend that metaphor to the paparazzi. You know, this is also around the time that like Princess Di gets killed by the paparazzi. Like this is tabloid culture suddenly is invading people's privacies, is become like a big delivery system of murder to the masses. And then extending even further to today, like we're filming this right now. We're inviting people into, this is my office. You know what I mean? That we are kind of conjuring a demon by filming ourselves constantly. And do we get full control of that narrative when we film ourselves? We do not. Things go viral or things get hacked, and suddenly something that privately happens in your house is being consumed and you have no control over it. And it's as if a ghost has come in or an alien has invaded your house and abducted you and taken you someplace that is no longer your own reality under your own control.
Yeah, it's this sense of the observer, and it's getting into this whole thing about like, you know, a particle until it is observed exists in both states. It's Schrodinger's cat. It's a core sort of like scientific philosophical question to be grappled with, and you know, I think there's a line that's kind of a throwaway line, but it's like the thesis of the whole movie, especially as we're talking about it now. I'm seeing it is where, you know, she says he hates video cameras when they're talking to the detectives, and he says something along the lines of, I wrote this down too. Yeah, he says something along the lines of like, yeah, I don't want to remember things as they actually happened. He says, I prefer to. I like to remember things. I like to remember things my own way. That's what he says. And so that like, kind of sets the whole thing up, where there's what actually happened, and then there's what was experienced, and there's also what was remembered, which is a combination of those two things. And all of those are parallel realities that are existing at the same time. And I do think that's kind of what he's playing with here in a lot of ways. And how a camera tells one story, the moment tells a different story, and your memory tells a different story, all of the same event. I mean, how many times have we looked back on a playback of something and go, oh, I didn't realize that happened, or I didn't see it from, I didn't realize this was also happening in the room at the same time. And then it's also doesn't line up with your memory of the situation, right? Yeah, yeah. This is left field and neither here nor there, but it just got me thinking because we were talking about dialogue. I love the pacing of the dialogue in this film, and a lot of his films in general. Just everyone speaks so slowly and leaves big pauses. And just like, there's just this, like, you just settle into it where you're just like, everyone there's just something just off about the way everybody talks. Super minimalistic dialogue, especially at the beginning. What is it? A videotape. What's on it? I don't know. I haven't watched it yet. Well, what's it say? Big pause as she hands him the videotape. Should we watch it? I guess so. Like, what is this? It's wild dialogue. Amazing. And then it finishes, must be a real estate agent. Yeah. Super weird and not naturalistic. It's unsettling, but you just kind of like cozy into it. You're just like, I don't know. There's this slowness to it that I really enjoy. Yeah. The other thing that I thought of watching this movie, and I have to feel that this is something that David Lynch is also aware of, because I do think dreams are such an influence on his movies, is this movie reminds me of a dream where you're like, oh, I had a weird dream last night. It started, we were all at a party and you were there. And then suddenly we were suddenly on Mars fighting a big war, and you weren't you, but you were you. You know what I mean? Where like dreams will take these big narrative turns halfway through and become something completely else and take on a totally different narrative. And then, but you all think it's real. You think it's real while it's happening. And then you wake up and you look back and you go, wow, that dream was really strange. It totally changed halfway through. And if that were a movie, if you were to write that as a script, it would look a lot like what Lost Highway is, I think. Yeah, yeah. What do you think the desert highway like represents, and like it being like the title of the movie and the main motif, and that image that you keep returning to, like where it's, also it's interesting because the car in that is driving in the center of the road. It's not in a lane, so it's like it's going the wrong way, halfway going the wrong way.
David
sort of
Lynch
wonder.
said, I can't remember what, it might have been one of Guilford's books, but he basically said, oh God, I have it written down here somewhere. I can go find it. But Lost Highway was a line in something that he liked. And it was a phrase that stuck with him. And he was like, Lost Highway. I like that. It's spooky. It's weird. It kind of gives you the idea of like a highway leading you off into some place that's been forgotten about. And he said that it was a phrase that he carried around for a while, and that he started this movie going, I want that to be the title of the movie. And then he and Guilford sat down and they would just kick out ideas of what the Lost Highway movie is, you know? So I think it's one of those things where it's almost like him chasing a lyric or chasing an idea and seeing where it leads, which is kind of what a Lost Highway might be too. Like, where does this road go?
Yeah.
But again, there's like things in this movie that I know this is my interpretation and not necessarily like the literal what the movie's about, but the driving down the road in the middle of the desert at night evokes like UFO imagery to me. And
it really does. Yeah.
Every time that the morph happens, or Balthasar Getty finds himself in a new place, or Bill Pullman finds himself in a new place, like there is a bright white static or blue light that comes down from above that kind of feels like aliens are coming in, that something interdimensional is interrupting our reality, and that maybe these lost highways are roads to these parallel universes and these other identities. You know, it's how we get from one point to another. And the very end of the movie is him being chased by the cops, and the light happens again, and he starts to morph again. And this time into, we don't even know if it's Balthasar Getty. Yeah. And that's just where it ends. He's just transforming into some new person.
Yeah, it's like you'd almost kind of imagine that movie actually ends with the cops just pulling over an empty car and there's just no one in it or something.
Right.
You know? Yeah, it's just like taken up into the whatever it was, whatever being or creature. Yeah. That's a good read on it. I like that.
It's a way. I mean, this is the thing. David Lynch, like,
and I love.
What does it mean to you?
Like, we get to sit around and talk about it now, but like, I love that how he, kind of hated talking about his movies and explaining them in press tours. Not kind of, absolutely. And he's like, the movie is the talking. And he's like, I'm done talking now. You go talk. You make sense of it. Like, that's not what I'm doing here. And it's nice. He gives us this thing that we can just sort of ponder and hold up as a mirror to our own reality and our own experience. And
it really is dream logic. This movie operates on dream logic, and you have to accept the dream logic on face value. Another thing that you pointed out, I wanted to bring up about the detectives also are gone halfway through the movie, and there's new detectives. They're not the same detectives that we had at the beginning of the movie. Right. And we're like, are these the same guys? Or are we just told, no, now there's two new detectives who are white guys with mustaches and suits who kind of look like the other guys, but they're following Balthasar Getty. They're not. Any other script would say, no, those have to be the same characters. Why are you introducing a whole new set of detectives here? And then at the very end, all four detectives are together, and you're like, wait, they all knew each other? What is happening?
That kind of that leads me to that whole idea of like, these are parallel realities overlapping, and these detectives are sort of the grounding characters, where it's like, they're sort of the same version of themselves in a different reality, and at that final ending, it all starts to overlap, and these two acts of these two realities sort of come crashing together, and you kind of get the whole thing
merge. And then the end of the film is a loop with him calling his own intercom and saying Dick Laurent is dead. And then the cops pull up, they chase down the street, and Bill Pullman at the beginning of the movie does not see the cop cars and the cops driving away. So you have to assume that he's now communicating to his previous reality, which is in an alternate timeline.
Right.
And so he has actually hopped timelines and merged timelines, and now he's at the end of the movie, he's at a completely different reality than where we began.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it becomes sort of this hybrid of both observed realities, both perceived universes.
And Balthasar Getty lives in this like rebel without a cause reality. You know, this little punk kid in the valley, you know, like running around necking in cars. I love also another thing that we did not mention is the arrival of Gary Busey and the mom just showing up in their matching leather jackets, jeans, and sunglasses. I'm like, these characters are great. Like they're just. Yeah. We don't need to know anything.
Like kind of bad parents.
Yeah, so good. I love it. He's like, I'm gonna go hang out with these guys. He's like, oh, wow, I think that'd be good for you. You know,
some good.
Like, yeah, do some good.
But those characters too, they got a glimpse into what actually happened, because there's that scene where they're talking about, we'll never tell the police, we'll never talk about what happened that night, and he's saying, tell me, and you don't get it. They don't tell you.
Nope.
But they saw something. They saw
that light take him. I think they saw a light take him away. I think he vanished before their eyes. Yeah, and was merged with Bill Pullman.
Yeah. And
that poor teenage girl who's just so obsessed with him.
Yeah.
So
she
funny.
She got a rough handheld there.
She really did.
Not as rough as some of the others. All she had to do was get her heart broken, not her head split open. As speaking of which, we alluded to it, but man, that head in the coffee table, what a gag.
So great. If you're a horror buff and you're a like gross gore guy or gal, you know, like that moment, that's just such a great, because it's also like plays on an innate fear that we all have of like, what if I tripped and just like my head went into this, you know, the benign kill, you know?
Totally. Yeah. It's so sort of like, it is like benign. He just flops and then he's just there like arms down.
And it's comical.
It's funny.
It's funny. It's like something out of a Tarantino movie.
Sense of humor. Yeah, totally. Yeah. There's always that undercurrent of humor in all of this stuff that
the Robert Loggia scene where he's beating up the guy and telling him to take traffic lessons and read the manual and obey the law. Yeah, is so funny.
It's funny, yeah.
And the shot of the guy, the bodyguards buckling up their seatbelts because they know what's coming.
They know what's about to happen. Yeah,
it's like, I can't. If there's one thing I can't abide, it's tailgating. You know. It's hilarious. Like those scenes are there's such, and Twin Peaks has so many moments like that where you're just going from like a dark, tragic moment of a mother grieving for her murdered daughter to like a goofy local, you know, saying something or doing something. I love it. I love those just abrupt changes in tone.
Yeah. Another moment that just like popped into my head of like the overlapping realities is when he's in the mechanic's shop and what's the guy's name who's also in Twin Peaks, the older guy? Yes, Jack Nance.
Eraserhead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the saxophone music is playing in the stereo, and it's, you know, it's clearly Fred Madison's saxophone playing.
Yeah,
and you know, and he starts getting this headache, and he's like, you could tell it's really messing with him, and then, you know, he turns it off, and then the Jack Nance who's like, well, I was enjoying that. This is like, you kind of wonder like what is he a grounded character? Is he in reality? Is he some sort of who
ethereal?
Is he?
Yeah,
sort of.
Don't know.
He's almost like he sort of, to me, represents the light in a way. Like there's something about him that's so pure and innocent and not bad, but also a little bit, you know, maybe sort of this mischievous elf kind of creature.
Yeah, like not a real human in this world.
He's like the foil to the keeper of the darkness, you know.
And it's weird too, because none of the humans, very few of the humans, if any, feel like real humans. You know what I mean?
Sure.
There's an argument where they're all like some weird spirit. You know what I mean? Walking around in human clothes. Sort of,
this like, elemental drama just playing out on a loop. Like, it very much could be
none of this could be reality. It could be some sort of like, that's the thing about David Lynch. You could like, there's somebody who could watch this movie who's like, you know what I think? I think a bunch of fairies got together and made a movie about what they think American movies are. And Lost Highway is the result.
Right.
Like aliens made a movie about humans based on transmissions they got from space. And they're like, this is what we think humans are like in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And that's the
movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's Lost Highway.
Pretty good summation of David Lynch's career.
Yeah. That's what I always described. Like Twin Peaks to me is a soap opera taking place in another show. that's already heightened. Like, and even Twin Peaks has a soap opera within its soap opera.
It does, yeah.
I feel like Twin Peaks is the soap opera within a soap opera. We're just watching that. Like what characters in another soap opera would be watching on TV is Twin Peaks. There's like you're one major step removed from reality. You're in an you're not in the universe next door. You're in the universe next door. You're on the universe on the other side of our parallel universe. And that's where Lynch exists. It's two universes over.
Perhaps we're not in base level reality ourselves.
I don't think we are. I would say evidence suggests we are not.
Yeah. Random side note as we're kind of wrapping this up. The mechanics shop that he works in is the old Firestone building on Beverly that is now a brewery and a bar. And I went there quite a while ago, but I saw the sign. I was like, oh, I know that location. So you can go there and you can have a beer and sit right where they shot all that. So it's kind of fun.
The address doesn't 2225 or 2224 Deep Dell Place doesn't actually exist.
You looked it up.
But Deep Dell Place exists and it's not far from where I live. And I went, oh fuck, this actually kind of cool. That Andy's house is kind of in my neighborhood, which also freaked me out, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is weird. It's just at the top of the hill up there.
The spooky hills of Hollywood and the secrets they hold.
I think so. Yeah, and it also has like the weird sex parties and snuff films. Obviously, that's another I think wink and link to his obsession with the Black Dahlia murders. And the Black Dahlia murder and the idea of one of the theories of being like, there's that weird Hollywood doctor that lived in the Frank Lloyd Wright building who threw all those orgies and was maybe one of the killers of the Black Dahlia. So there's also there's that like real inspired by true crime stuff in this movie. And Laura Palmer is the Black Dahlia as well. Like, that the Black Dahlia shows up in a lot of his movies. So that mythos.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right. Would you recommend this to our Club Scouts? And how many watts out of 10 watts are we going to give Lost Highway?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend this. I recommend all of his films. I love David Lynch. It's some of the first, like David Lynch and Stanley Kubrick are the first sort of DVDs that I bought and collected and wanted to make sure. They're the first two directors that I was like, I want to see all of this. So yes. Is it a normal movie that gives you a story? No. So if you want that, it's not. But
if you want everything wrapped up and answered for you, you're not going to be satisfied. So go in knowing that, I would say.
And also, God, what a just great. Is it late 90s? It is, right? It's
97.
Still in the 90s. 97
it came
just
out.
Like the music, the fashion, the cars.
Balthazar Getty's facial hair could not be more, and hairstyle could not be more 90s than there is some real late 90s dated stuff in this, but that kind of gives me a warm fuzzy feeling, I gotta say.
Totally, yeah. And like of the like, the like edgy 90s, the like kind of industrial goth, like this
his
soundtrack.
Friends, his whole group of friends.
I loved it. Yeah, it's great. Like, so 1,000% recommend this. What do we
videotapes is obvious. Videotapes, I feel like, is pretty obvious. Reassembling exploding cabins could be one. We haven't even talked about the cabin in the desert.
The fact that the cabin explodes in reverse several times over. And
several times.
We didn't even get to all that. Yeah,
the part where he's in the jail cell and he sees reality literally part like curtains, and he sees the cabin like unexploding.
Yeah, I guess let's judge it on overlapping realities. How many? You go. I always have to go first.
I would say I'm giving this a 9, maybe 9.5 out of 10 overlapping realities. You know what I mean? Like it's I think Mulholland Drive might do what this movie does better. But
I think it's a little more matured in a way or something.
Yeah, and I don't know. I have to go back. I haven't watched Mulholland Drive since like 1999, or 2000. I need to go back and watch it.
Yeah,
maybe we'll do that as maybe we can explore that. I love it. I don't know. I'm going to say 9.5. I don't think it's a perfect 10 Lynch film, but it is up there for me. I really do like it.
That's where I was landing too. It's not his perfect 10. It's a 9, I would say. And
I'd say 9. I agree. Let's give it a 9 out of 10.
I mean, they're all. I
think about this movie. I think about.
I do too.
This is the other thing with like Lynch. Is like I carry these movies. I think about this movie still. There was a lot that I forgot about, but the stuff that sticks with me has stuck with me. I mean, that the scene with Robert Blake, who, by the way, went on to murder his girlfriend in a restaurant outside of.
I completely forgot about that. That was him.
Like that happened after this.
Holy shit! I totally forgot. That was in the Valley,
so
right?
There's like it was in on Tahunga.
Yeah. My God, that was Robert
Vincenzo's
Blake.
or Valentino's. What's it called?
Something like that.
Let me look. So that's the other thing is like Robert Blake is an actual murderer.
Wow, that's wild. Well, I mean, and also like.
Or had her murdered, I should say. I can't remember the exact story.
He did get
there was like a
convicted, right, for that?
Yeah. No, he was acquitted. He was acquitted in why he was a Beretta star. Was acquitted in wife's murder.
It was Vitello's.
He died at 89. Yeah, Vitello's. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's also weird that there's like, as David Lynch is like making a movie inspired by like tabloid LA murder, because I think we have to say the O.J. Simpson, the Nicole Brown Simpson murder is obviously a huge influence on
resonated
on the murder,
Los Angeles and the world
in this movie.
Yeah, totally.
And he's making it, and the bad guy in this movie actually goes on to become a LA true crime murder story himself. Mm-hmm. So that's also fucking wild.
Yeah. So okay, wait. So he
May
I think 4th, 2001.
Yeah.
With Bonnie Lee Bakley was her name. They went to Vitello's.
It happened in the parking
City.
lot. He claimed that he had a gun and that he went out to the parking lot to get his gun, but somehow he's acquitted of it. But I have to go back and revisit that whole murder story.
Yeah, I don't really know the whole story there, so I want to handle it with.
I think there was also like a hitman involved. Robert Blake.
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Wife.
Man, I used to go to Vitello's with my family growing up.
Bonnie Lee Bakley was the second wife of actor Robert Blake, who was her 10th husband. Wow. Whoa. Bakley was fatally shot while sitting in Blake's parked car near a restaurant, which is Vitello's in Studio City, in May 2001. Yeah. So that was in the parking lot of Vitello's.
Wow.
But he got acquitted of it. Well, anyway, it's crazy.
Crazy
it's crazy
stuff.
that he's in this movie as the interdimensional ghoul with a video camera.
Yeah, totally weird. Well, and then like Marilyn Manson appearing in that whole thing with everything that came to light about him is like David Lynch had a knack for getting right to the edge and sort of seeing things, seeing the darkness, and it's like it's a weird note to end it on, but
weird note. Well,
yeah, it's a weird film.
Okay, let us know your thoughts about Lost Highway. Let us know if you agree with the thoughts about the presentation of High Strangeness, and let us know if you want us to revisit more David Lynch this year. I mean, I'd be definitely down to do that for Movie Club. I think this movie's probably a little too much for some of our club scouts, and that's fine. So go in cautiously if you're still a little nervous about it. But I don't know. I don't know why I love weird, dark, fucked up shit, but I do.
Because it's in us all, and it's nice to sit with it and try to make some sense of it.
And it's so pretty when David Lynch does it. I'll say that.
He's very good at handling the shadow.
He's just the best. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We love you. Where there's love, there's kisses.
Thank you, Patreons.
Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced and engineered by Riley Bray and executive produced by Riley Bray and Michael McMillian. Our theme song, Come Alone, is by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. Follow Suneaters on Spotify. For 3 bonus episodes every month and ad-free episodes, check out BCC The Other Side at patreon.com/BigfootCollectorsClub.